All right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you're ready for some more history of the Hermetica, an introduction, and the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs, brought to us from Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy. But before that, it is Wednesday, ladies and gentlemen, and you know what that means. Time for some Wednesday wisdom, diving into, like we just said, the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs and the history of how this wisdom has made it to our very own hands today. And I do have this book linked in the description below the video if you want to get it in your hands as well, ladies and gentlemen. So, I believe this is number 7 or number 8 of this series. I lost track a couple episodes ago, even though it's less than 10 still. So I hope you got yourself, ladies and gentlemen, a warm beverage or a comfortable beverage of your choice and a comfy chair, because this is going to be another fantastic addition to our series, the history, an introduction to the history of the Hermetica and the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs. And so, ladies and gentlemen, we made our way from where we began, talking about a forgotten spiritual classic. The Hermetica, for those of you who don't know, or for those of you who are just joining us, and thank you if you are, the Hermetica is a collection of writings attributed to Thoth. Who is Thoth, you might ask? A mythical ancient Egyptian sage whose wisdom is said to have transformed him into a god, ladies and gentlemen. Thoth, who was venerated in Egypt from at least 3000 BCE, is credited with the invention of sacred hieroglyphic writing, and his figure portrayed as a scribe with the head of an ibis can be seen in many temples and tombs. And so Thoth was said to have revealed to the Egyptians all knowledge on astronomy, architecture, geometry, medicine, and religion, and was believed by the ancient Greeks to be the architect of the pyramids. So the wisdom of Thoth, or Hermes Trismegistus, which creates what we have is known as Hermetics, or the Hermetic philosophy, and this here being the Hermetica, giving us an introduction into that great wisdom that was laid down to us from Hermes Trismegistus, or Thoth, or maybe even from before those times, maybe even back to Atlantis, ladies and gentlemen. But so it is essential and illuminating, this volume, for anyone interested in understanding the West's roots in Egyptian and esoteric thought. And so we dive into thoughts on how this esoteric and occult knowledge, the knowledge of, mystical, the mystery schools, and knowledge of alchemy and astronomy, well, astrology, but you know what I mean, ladies and gentlemen, the ideas of the different philosophies and the different mystery schools, including astrology and alchemy, and even the ancient Egyptian religion. And so in Alexandria, in this universal city, as the Greeks called it, all of these cultures, the Greeks, the Jews, the Egyptians, the Babylonians, the Phoenicians, and even the Buddhists from India, as well as many others, came together to study and practice side by side and, compare their ideas openly. And it caused the great flowering of the library in the city of Alexandria. And so eventually they had to escape as the intolerant Holy Roman Christian Empire deemed them all as pagans. And so they escaped to the newly emerging Arab culture, taking this knowledge of the Hermetic writings with them and many other of the ancient esoteric mystery schools and mystery philosophies. And they created in Baghdad one of the first universities established there, called the House of Wisdom. And so the ideas and the sciences that had reached such heights in the city of Alexandria, in the Library of Alexandria, were significantly developed, and ancient pagan spiritual wisdom was studied and practiced. From its exalted position amongst the sacred scriptures of Egyptian spirituality, the Hermetica became the secret inspiration for an important undercurrent in Islamic philosophy. And so eventually the same thing happens there that happened in Alexandria. They were deemed pagans by the Orthodox religious structures. And once again, they had to escape on the four winds, ladies and gentlemen. And so then it came many years, many hundreds of years later, to Hermes and the reawakening of Europe. We're giving a recap now of the history and the story of how this ancient esoteric mystery, occult wisdom finds itself here today in this, the Hermetica, the Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs by Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy. So all credit goes to them, and we are reading from this book. And so the emergence of a glorious new culture in Florence, Italy, in 1460, they found and came across the lost works of the thrice great Hermes. And so they had created in Florence, Italy in 1438 a new Platonic academy, because they had the Platonic philosophy, which is also a esoteric knowledge. If you didn't know that, if you thought Plato was just a math guy, then you've got a lot more to learn, ladies and gentlemen. And I really don't even know that much. I'm just researching it myself. So thank you for being here. And thank you for being interested in some very fascinating subjects, ladies and gentlemen. Because this history is what gets us to, it's like everywhere this knowledge goes, the emergence of a glorious new culture in Florence signaled the end of the Dark Ages. With this period that we all know, we call this period the Renaissance, or the Renaissance, meaning rebirth, which is a fitting name, for at the heart of Hermetic philosophy is the idea of being spiritually reborn. And so, ladies and gentlemen, wherever this knowledge goes, it seems that there is a flourishing and a flowering of society and an enlightenment among people. But each time that this happens, it is squashed by the powerful religious authorities of the day, because they can't have people becoming enlightened, because that makes them much harder to control. And so, ladies and gentlemen, with that being said, we continue now with our story here in the introduction to the history of the Hermetica and the esoteric and occult knowledge and wisdom of the ages of, this is like the ultimate from Atlantis to now. So, and we've seen now why and how important this has been. It's profoundly influenced great names like Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and many more. Botticelli's famous Venus and Mars painting, for example, was painted at a precise astrological moment, known as a, quote, talisman of occult radiance, capable of magically transporting the viewer to an altered state of spiritual awareness, or what some may deem as a mystical experience. And so these artists that we all think of as just great artists or great poets or great mathematicians or whatever it be, Pythagoras and Plato in the Middle East, and through the Zoroastrian Magi's and the Sufis, and all of these different people were influenced by this wisdom that has to do with esoteric and mystery sciences, such as astrology, which we just referenced from Botticelli's Venus and Mars there. Astrological moments being when you did the painting, which is funny. I have a painting right here behind the computer that I happened to do, I believe it was on 11/11 2021. It's hard to believe it's been that long. It feels like I did it just a few weeks ago, but maybe I'll grab it just for your viewing pleasure. But so what we just described was Hermes and the reawakening of Europe. And so before we continue, here's that painting, just referencing these times of astrological significance. This is, of course, the magician without the magician. So the magician before the magician, ladies and gentlemen. But that was, I don't know if you can see, yeah, 11/11/21. That's when I did that one. That represents all kinds of things. We'll get to that one day. That's a deeper subject there, ladies and gentlemen. But it goes right with this philosophy and this knowledge of hermetics and the universe, an understanding of reality. Because that's what we're all about on this channel, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why we're doing this series, is because there are ways that you can talk about spirituality and philosophy and whatnot and really help people out, which is what I'm here to do. I'm here to share information and knowledge and wisdom, the wisdom of the ages and the wisdom of the Tao, and whatever kind of wisdom it be, so that we can increase the quality of our lives, because our lives are made up of moments. And if we have the ability to influence each of our moments through whatever it is we've worked on through our journey, and creating this ability to have an influence on the quality of moments that we experience, then we can have an influence on our lives, ladies and gentlemen, and in turn make them better, make our lives better, but not only our lives, the lives of those we interact with and those around us, family members, loved ones, friends, co-workers. Change, great change in the world begins with an individual, but most importantly, within the individual. So, ladies and gentlemen, where we left off last week on this story of the history of the Hermetica and how it survived through the ages, how this occult, mystical knowledge, how this esoteric knowledge, hidden for the select few, has survived. So I'll start right here. Copernicus, in his on the first page of his On the Revolution of Celestial Orbs, published in 1543, even Copernicus quotes the words of thrice great Hermes: "The sun is the visible God." Think deeply on that one, ladies and gentlemen. The sun is the visible God. For how many references to the sun are there throughout maybe well-known religious traditions and maybe even less well-known pagan traditions, as they would deem them? So, continuing with what the book says here, quote, "As in Alexandria 1,000 years earlier, the Renaissance viewed science, art, literature, and religion as parts of a united whole, a unified whole, to be studied together. Science, art, literature, and religion as parts of a unified whole to be studied together, including those things that we nowadays deem as pseudosciences, or just silly, mysticism, or whatever words we can come up with to diminish the importance of astrology and alchemy and all of these things. Like, even if you look at a farmer's almanac, you'll start to begin to find all kinds of things that relate to astrology and the importance. And it's like, wait a minute, but you start to ask more questions. And so hopefully you're asking questions and questioning answers, ladies and gentlemen. Continuing with the book here, quote, "All aspects of human life were now opened up as a legitimate area of investigation." So nothing was off limits, ladies and gentlemen. If you thought about it and wanted to look into it, that's just fine. All areas of human life and all aspects were now opened up as legitimate areas of investigation, which is what science really is. It's a continued investigation. The cult of science, as we now have it, or, the institution of science in academia, has got to the point now to where questioning answers is not allowed. And you must follow what we obviously already know. Because if something goes against what we've already established, then that upsets the status quo. And that's unacceptable. But, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully we're getting closer back to this time, as it's speaking of here, in Alexandria, 1,000 years earlier before the Renaissance, where we may have our third or fourth Renaissance, ladies and gentlemen, that there will be a time that science and art and literature and religion will all be parts of a united whole. All of these aspects of human life will now be opened up to be studied together and to be opened up as legitimate areas of investigation. Continuing, because when this is possible, actually, this allows the great enlightenment and flowering and flourishing of civilization, rather than constraining the masses to fit within the plan. Different subject. Now, continuing with what the book says here, quote, "It was a situation," so this situation here that we were just describing, where all of these areas of life can be studied and they're open for questioning, and it was a situation that really challenged the authorities of the Roman Catholic Church in 1492, as it did back in Alexandria. And so, with the aid of the King of France, the Roman Catholic Church crushed the Republic of Florence. Now, see, this is really interesting, and this is important to keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen. It's like they crushed. So, right when there was this flourishing in Florence, the reawakening of the spirit of ancient paganism, that was causing this momentous shift in the consciousness, or in the way of thinking, or the psychology of average individuals, changing society. And so, they're like, here it goes again. This knowledge has popped up. With this happened before. This is what the Roman Catholic Church is saying to themselves and to the King of France. They're like, listen, we've seen this before. When this stuff pops up, people begin to become independent and self-actualized and on purpose. And they don't really just take mindless direction. And this is not good for our control structure. And so we cannot have this. So with the aid of the King of France, they crushed the Republic of Florence. Although the heady days of the new academy, which was the new Platonic academy, the heady days, think of all the deep thought that there was going on in the new Platonic academy, as they called them, as they called it in the experiment, or the Florentine experiment, the new learning, who began sending out emissaries and started new movements with this ancient pagan esoteric occult wisdom. They took it everywhere they went, and within a few years of this wisdom of Plato and Hermes, Platonic and Hermetic philosophy, within a few years of this arriving in Florence and being dispersed, they had the printing presses also arriving in Italy. And so they printed and dispersed this wisdom throughout Europe, and these guys caused movements wherever they went. So, government structures and religious structures, which were the same thing, tied together. They couldn't stand for this, because this isn't good, and they've seen it in the past. So now, even though the heady days of the new academy were over, the book continues, the suppression was too late to prevent the ripples of its influence expanding ever outwards. Woo! We're winning, ladies and gentlemen. A round of applause. Think of that again. Even though they crushed this Republic of Florence, which spawned some great wisdom. We're talking about Leonardo da Vinci, ladies and gentlemen. They crushed it, but it was too late because of the printing presses and the willingness of men and women, individuals traveling to share and spread the knowledge, the great wisdom of the ages. They would not let it be squashed down by the Roman Catholic Church again. And so the suppression was too late to prevent the ripples of the influence of this great esoteric, mystical knowledge and wisdom of Hermes and Thoth and Plato. It was too late to suppress its expansion ever outwards. Continuing with what the book says, Florentine scholars were dispersed across Europe and became known as, quote, the fifth essence. Isn't that beautiful? The fifth, woo, almost spilled the tea, ladies and gentlemen. You know what that means. Can't spill the tea, but we are spilling the tea here. The Florentine scholars were dispersed across Europe and became known as the fifth essence. This sounds amazing. It's like a movie. This would be a movie I would watch. Maybe not everybody would like this movie as much as I would, but if you're here now listening, then I'm sure you would. And I hope you're getting value. And if you are, consider subscribing. And if you already subscribed, then thank you so much. I love you. And consider leaving a comment and let me know, of course, what you think about this, because it's so great to hear from those. I always try to get back to each of my commenters. The fifth essence, ladies and gentlemen. So continuing here with what the book says, the taste for all things Italian, art, sculpture, fashion, literature, philosophy, and I'm sure many more things, was insatiable. And within less than 200 years, the Renaissance had conquered Europe. And that, ladies and gentlemen, leads us into the unifying religion, the next section here of our introduction to the history of the Hermetica. And so without me rambling like I normally do, let's dive right into it. So this fifth essence, so with the printing press, printing the knowledge of this occult and esoteric philosophy and wisdom of the mystical sciences and the mystery schools, from the pagan traditions deemed pagan by the Orthodox religions, Islam and Christianity. Then this was spread throughout Europe because of what happened in Florence. And even though the Republic of Florence was crushed, the new academy was over, but these ripples of the influence of this ancient esoteric knowledge spread far across Europe, and books and emissaries and Florentine scholars were dispersed, becoming known as this fifth essence, which was the taste for all things. The taste for all things influenced by this great wisdom. And within less than 200 years, the Renaissance had conquered Europe, had conquered the Dark Ages, ladies and gentlemen. So what is it that ended the Dark Ages and started the Renaissance? Well, my video last week had me holding the book or something and saying, this is what caused the Renaissance. This is what started the Renaissance. This is what ended the Dark Ages, the Dark Ages. And so if you're not getting any, you're like, why is this important? What do you know, why are you talking about this? Well, it's like, there were really bad times in our past because of certain groups of individuals. And it might have to do with astrological cycles as well, influencing the consciousness of humanity and mankind, taking us to a much lower consciousness point. But where this knowledge is not crushed, it seems to change humanity, seems to conquer the darkness when we become enlightened. Think about that. When we become enlightened with wisdom and with knowledge and understanding and awareness, we also conquer the darkness. But that doesn't mean that the power with knowledge cannot be used for darkness, because that happens just as well, which is what causes the Dark Ages. And so it's this balance of the power being used for either enlightenment or enslavement. That was a good little ramble. I better clip that bit out. Rewind that, like rewind 1 minute. That was great. Enlightenment, conquering the dark with this wisdom, but the power can also be used to create the Dark Ages through enslavement rather than enlightenment. So now, diving into the unifying religion, the next chapter of this story of how the Hermetica and this ancient esoteric wisdom came to us here today. The unifying religion, quote, in England, the works of Hermes had a profound effect on the circle of courtiers surrounding Elizabeth I. This is so funny. I was just listening to Robertson last night, which is Scotty Roberts on his YouTube channel. Search up Scotty Roberts if you haven't ever checked him out. He was on Ancient Aliens way back in the day, back when that was new, and we were just beginning to ask questions and learn the basics. But of course, that's long, that stuff's now so simple. It's like we've gone far beyond Ancient Aliens, ladies and gentlemen. And we now know that it wasn't actually aliens. It was us and our great ability in the past, because we were much greater, obviously, than we ever thought we were. Being proved to us here by this ancient esoteric wisdom that comes from times before history, prehistory. But I was listening to Robertson, and they were talking about the royal family from 1400 and 1500 and 16. They were kind of talking about interesting times in these families and how certain members of the family were excluded and whatnot. And Scotty was even nice enough to bring up my question in the chat and put it on the video and ask Miss Robertson. I'm not sure what her first name is, but so they even took my question. So if you want to have your question answered by Scotty Roberts, then go over and watch his live streams, ladies and gentlemen. I really recommend it. But they were talking about these royal families, and I asked, what kind of, I wonder how many of these children of these royal families are initiated into these occult sides of these elite, and how many are actually excluded. And the main point of my question was, how many are actually excluded? Because we know some are initiated. But this is funny that they were talking about that yesterday, and I brought up the esoteric or mystical occult side of the royal families. And here in our next chapter for today, it begins by saying, in England, the works of Hermes, this esoteric occult knowledge, ladies and gentlemen, had a profound effect on the circle of courtiers surrounding Queen Elizabeth I. Sir Philip Sidney, Sir Walter Raleigh, John Donne, Christopher Marlowe, William Shakespeare, ladies and gentlemen, all influenced by this knowledge, this wisdom, these philosophies. George Chapman, Francis Bacon, Sir Francis Bacon. We all wonder and guess if that could have been the same William Shakespeare. But, that's another conspiracy for its own time. So they all were all acquainted with the works of the Egyptian sage Hermes, or Thoth, Hermes Trismegistus. Elizabeth, Queen Elizabeth's personal astrologer, whom she referred to as her philosopher, was the enigmatic Hermeticist, John Dee. John Dee, ladies and gentlemen, probably not the John Dee that we're thinking of. The Hermeticist. She called him her philosopher. So, see, this is fascinating to think of here. This is why I'm going through this, because this is teaching us things about how the esoteric and occult philosophies have been in society and have influenced society at different levels in the importance and its power and its ability. And so this is teaching us right here where in England, back in the day, not sure what year this is talking about, but the time around Elizabeth I, Queen Elizabeth I, if you were practicing astrology openly, you were a heretic and you were, the worst things. You were, let's just say, punished by the church or the law. We won't say what kind of dark punishments they would do to these, pagan heretics or these people practicing these things known as witchcraft or whatever, astrology. I mean, once you learn about this stuff, you learn that there's a ton of different structures and whatnot. So when people talk about, philosophical wisdom traditions that have to do with esoteric and occult knowledge, it's far different than what most people understand as cult practices, and witchcraft things and whatever that. There's many different facets. So don't take this as we're just talking about, dark practices, ladies and gentlemen. This is philosophy. This is what enlightens people and causes the Renaissance and ends the Dark Ages. So this is how the elite did it, and these rulers, and probably how they do it today. They tell you, you're not allowed to study this. This is evil, and you will be punished if you practice this and study this. But then them themselves have their own personal astrologers. And personal, she called it as her philosopher, probably as a cover. But so Elizabeth's personal astrologer, continuing with what the book says here, I just thought it was important for you to realize that at the same time that the queen was using these things, she was telling the public that they can't use the very same things that they're using at a higher level. And so it was, what's that called when you do something and tell somebody else that they can't do it? You know what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I'm talking about. And so this hermeticist, this enigmatic hermeticist, John Dee, quote, he was a brilliant mathematician and the first person to translate the complete works of the Euclid into English. Wow. Wow. Dr. Dee owned the greatest library in England. Oh, man. Can you imagine? Can you imagine the books in this library? The greatest library in England. And his home was regarded as a third university to Oxford and Cambridge. The home of Dr. Dee or John Dee. A third university to Oxford and Cambridge, and he himself was a hermeticist. The book continues, he was visited by scholars from all over Europe and made frequent journeys to Prague, where the first detailed commentaries, I don't know if it's pronounced Prague or Prague, Prague, where the first detailed commentaries on the Hermetica were being written. Now, they call them the first, but of course, back in Alexandria and the early times of the Arab culture, I'm sure they all were doing this. And maybe even in Florence, they were, creating these commentaries of their own on the Hermetica. But it says here, the first detailed commentaries on the Hermetica were being written. At this time, Prague was the capital of Bohemia. Ooh. Where have you heard the term Bohemian or Bohemia before, ladies and gentlemen? And maybe that ties into a knowledge and understanding and a reference back to a time. And quote, at this time, Prague was the capital of Bohemia, an enlightened republic. So Bohemia and this Prague was an enlightened republic where Hermetic scholars, Platonic philosophers, ladies and gentlemen, Jewish rabbis, and scientists of every nation found sanctuary at the court of Rudolph II. So Europe was being ravaged by the wars of religion between Protestants and Catholics. See what they did? See how they did this? It's like Europe's being ravaged by these wars created by a separation of Protestants and Catholics. But at the same time, there is enlightened wisdom going around that was, deemed pagan. You can't do this. You're a heretic. If you're doing this, we squashed it down. You either have to choose one side of the war. You're going to be red or you're going to be blue, ladies and gentlemen. And if you want to be both sides and be purple, if you're not of a certain royal bloodline, or if you're not of royalty, purple being the royal color. I always think of Crown Royal in its purple bag with the gold crown, symbolism, ladies and gentlemen. But you got to choose. You're either red or blue, you're either Protestant or Catholic, and you're going to fight, and you're going to die. And there is no enlightenment. There's no time for enlightenment. We can't research. This is like my ramble on what the rulers or the religious leaders of the day were ramming down the throats of common citizens. It's like, you either got to be red or blue, you're going to fight, and there is no time for studying ancient esoteric wisdom because that's pagan philosophy and it's evil, and it's going to hurt you. When in reality, there was this place during all of this, the religious wars, the wars of religion between the Protestants and Catholics. There was this sanctuary at the court of Rudolph II where enlightened people, there was an enlightened republic where Hermetic, Platonic, Jewish, and many others, scientists of every nation, mystics, of every nation found sanctuary in this court of Rudolph. And so there's these wars between Protestants and Catholics, and in Bohemia, another way was proposed, Hermeticism. So this was offering an alternative, ladies and gentlemen. Evangelists of this new Egyptian religion of thrice great Hermes. So this is why this section is titled The Unifying Religion. Evangelists of this new Egyptian religion of thrice great Hermes, such as Giordano Bruno. Giordano. I thought that was pronounced different, but Giordano Bruno traveled extensively in Europe. Bruno interpreted the new sun-centered cosmos proposed by Copernicus in an entirely new mystical way. So there, once you have a perspective and a new philosophy, remember, change your thoughts, change your life, living the wisdom of the Tao. But when you can change your thoughts, and you have a new perspective, then you change your life. What it is you see now opens up new doorways, ladies and gentlemen. So this new philosophy, not restricted by the, orthodox religions, Bruno interpreted this new sun-centered thing, just like Copernicus brought up in 1543, writing, the sun is the visible God. And with this new understanding, Giordano Bruno realized that, wait a minute, I'm getting this in a new way. He interpreted this new sun-centered cosmos proposed by Copernicus in an entirely new mystical way. Quote, as the rising of the sun at the dawning of the new age. As the rising of a new sun at the dawning of a new age, ladies and gentlemen. The age of the bull, the age of the ram, the age of Pisces in the age of Aquarius, the man with the water pitcher. The dawning of a new age, ladies and gentlemen. We are entering that new age. We are in the age of Aquarius now, just coming out of the age of Pisces. And during each of these ages, the hierarchies and the structures fall and transfer to a new way. And hopefully we are going into a new enlightened way. And so, just like Giordano Bruno discovered this new mystical understanding of the sun-centered God as the rising of a new sun at the dawning of a new age. He believed, the book says here, quote, he believed that the Egyptian religion of Hermes, so now we're getting an insight into Hermetics itself, rather than just the history of it, while still going into the history. But he believed that the Egyptian religion of Hermes was the ancestor of the Greek mystery schools, the religion of Moses and the Jews. Remember Moses with his staff and, all the magical things he could do. And remember, Moses studied or learned from the Egyptian priests, which would have had this esoteric wisdom tradition. And so Moses and the Jews and the birthplace of Christianity. So once again, let's say that sentence again, because these are deep things, ladies and gentlemen. So Giordano Bruno believed that the Egyptian religion of Hermes was the ancestor of the Greek mystery schools, the religion of Moses and the Jews, and the birthplace of Christianity. So this Hermetic philosophy is the birthplace of Christianity. And if you look at how the Roman Catholics did what they did, they would go around to these pagan, different, ancient, esoteric, mystical sciences and traditions, whether it was the Druids and their gods of nature and their knowledge of nature, or whether it was others, but that each of these, that what they would do is they would amalgamate ideas from these traditions into their own, so that way they would get the pagans to join and say, hey, look, we have some of what you already do in your pagan traditions. So rather than accepting death by us, you can join us because we have some of what you have, and it's okay. Because you can imagine how many people lost their lives refusing to succumb and become a member of their flock or following. But that was my ramblings again. If you're getting value, ladies and gentlemen, consider subscribing. And if you're already subscribed, leave me a comment. Let me know what you think of this. And so, in Bruno's imagination, it was now poised to become the unifying religion in which Jews, all denominations of Christians, Protestants and Catholics, Platonic humanists, and even Muslims could meet and resolve their differences. There are images from the Council of Nicaea and different images from those times, which I need to do more research on. But there are images of a flag that has the symbol of Islam or Muslim. Is that what it said here? Yeah, even Muslims. I'm thinking that's Islam. I mean, I'm uneducated in that area of religion, so I apologize if I get things off about the Middle Eastern religious traditions. But there's symbolism from ancient times, these times where the three forms of Christianity were seeking to dominate and control the world, because they had a hierarchy that sprang from the same esoteric knowledge that we're talking about here, that started way back in the beginning. And there was this knowledge, and there's an importance with three for some reason. But So you had Catholic, Christianity. So yeah, you had Catholicism, Judaism, and Islam. And these three wings were taking over the world through conquer, divide and conquer, and war. And then you can control. We're going to get to the end of this section. We got half a page left here, ladies and gentlemen. Normally I stop like in the middle of a section. I did last time and I didn't want to do that. So what we're talking about today here has been the establishment of a possibility for a unifying religion. But I have no idea what I'm going to title this video. I never really do. Never really do, ladies and gentlemen. The power and the impact of the knowledge of the esoteric and occult, Platonic and Hermetic philosophies. We'll see if that ends up being the title. So this guy, this Giordano Bruno, who's realizing that this Egyptian religion, this Hermetics, which is what spawned Platonic and Pythagorean philosophies, because they also learned from the Egyptian sages and priests. And then they brought back to Greece the knowledge that they had learned there. And so what he's saying here is this Egyptian religion was the beginning point, this religion of the sun. He believed that the Egyptian religion of Hermes was the ancestor of all of the major religions we know today. The Greek mystery schools, the Jewish traditions, the religion of Moses and the Jews, Christianity, Catholicism, and of course, Islam. All three spawned from this previous religion, which probably spawned from a previous knowledge. And so he, being in this place, being in Bohemia, in Prague, in this sanctuary where Platonic and Hermetic scholars and philosophers and different scientists of every nation, just like the description of Alexandria, and just like the description of each time that this happened. So Alexandria and Baghdad, and then in Florence, Italy, in the Renaissance. And then it survived because of the printing presses and the spread of this knowledge and information throughout Europe. They ended the Dark Ages. And now, here we are. I'm guessing this is around the time of Queen Elizabeth I, because that was the first reference at the beginning of this little section here. It's saying 1640, possibly, so maybe a couple hundred years later again, after the Renaissance, the 1492. Fascinating. What other date is it, ladies and gentlemen, that's 1492? And isn't it interesting that says it was a situation which challenged the authorities of the Roman Catholic Church, and in 1492, they crushed the Republic of Florence. And somebody else, I'm getting this wrong, somebody else supposedly sailed to the New World. If I'm getting that wrong, leave me a comment below, but I thought it was 1492 when Columbus sailed. I mean, and that's all just his story anyways, and believe me, I know that, so don't worry, I'm not that much of a numbskull, ladies and gentlemen. Not that much. But so Giordano Bruno is saying that these religions that we've had come from a single place. And I'll continue with what the book says here. And even Muslims, and there was a sanctuary in Prague in Bohemia. So in Bruno's imagination, because he sees this war going on between these different, very powerful religious institutions and orthodoxies, whether it be Islam, Catholicism, or Judeo-Christianity. He's seen people studying the ancient pagan or ancient esoteric wisdom, while this other stuff is going on in this place of sanctuary. And in Bruno's imagination, it was possible, and it was now poised to become the unifying religion in which Jews, all Christians, Platonic humanists, and even Muslims could meet and resolve their differences. So see, ladies and gentlemen, this wisdom tradition could be a meeting point and a connecting point to stop the arguing and the bloodshed of the red team, blue team, let's fight. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's obvious that the royal families were above the red versus blue because they're the ones orchestrating all of this. And they know this knowledge that we're talking about. So if they know that this could be a unifying wisdom, then certainly they would squash it. And Bruno was starting to see this. Bruno's courage and conviction was nowhere more clearly demonstrated than in his decision to return to Italy, which was a bad decision, ladies and gentlemen, where within a short time he was arrested by the Roman Catholic Church. He endured 8 years of torture. It makes me so sad. It's like every time there was a fantastic individual that tried to do something to change the world with this ancient esoteric knowledge that is held in the hands of the elite and used against us for enslavement rather than enlightenment, they do this. Bruno, with his idea of, wait a minute, guys, we don't have to fight about religion anymore. There's this unifying knowledge, and we can all be enlightened. He gets to Italy, and he's arrested immediately as a heretic against the Roman Catholic Church, and he endures 8 years of torture from these wonderful religious authorities. Don't we love them so? It's like, son of a... Oh, during which he refused to recant. And in 1600 was led out into the, quote, Square of Flowers. What a beautiful name. I'm sure they had plenty of flowers there, ladies and gentlemen. And even more than flowers, they had things where, unfortunately, what happened to Giordano Bruno for trying to bring the Enlightenment back to Italy. In the Square of Flowers, he was led out in 1600 in Rome and was ceremonially burnt alive. Ceremonially burnt alive. Like, this is a great thing. A great ceremony. This is what these crazy, I don't even know, they're like inhuman. These non-human controlled religious leaders and elite governmental authorities. So this is why it's confusing. And people say, well, yeah, we were really bad back then. And it's not like everybody was bad. I mean, sure, we were way less civilized, but at the same time, there was an opportunity for enlightenment as well. And it was just these institutions and authorities that were making these times seem so evil. Because they would do stuff like this. Yeah, let's ceremonially burn somebody alive. Like, after they just came with this new wonderful idea of how we can stop the religious wars and come together in peace. Got to get rid of that guy. Gosh. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen, if you can tell, I'm a little passionate about this. And if you never knew any of this, and if you've never seen, I'm not fully against Christianity. There are plenty of Christian people that I know, and they're perfectly loving, and, they're great people. And they have no idea that this kind of stuff is what spawned where we are today. They have no idea about history at all. And they think, oh, yeah. They just think what they're told and what they read. But they don't realize that these guys, these Roman Catholic dudes in, whether it be 52 AD or 560 AD or 1200 or 1400 or 1500 or 1600. Anyways, let's continue here, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're getting value. That was so nothing against Christians and Christian people. It was the rulership, the dogmatic hierarchies and the compartmentalization and the structures of orthodoxy that created, the ideas of heretics and pagans and all of these bad people. It wasn't the individuals themselves. And so if you're convinced that there's a certain group of people out there that shall remain unnamed, that is the most evil group of people in the world, and they've took it all over and it's their fault, realize that people who are followers of such ways may not have any idea that that's actually the case. And so don't blame everybody that labels themselves as something, ladies and gentlemen. It's important to determine the difference of the people running the show and pulling the strings. If you've ever seen a puppet show, they pull the strings at the top and the puppets at the bottom dance. And the puppets don't often know what it is that the people pulling the strings have in mind for the story. That was a good metaphor. But the vision of a universal Hermetic religion was fated to fade. That's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen, bringing it out of the shadows, sweeping it out from underneath the rug and bringing it back into the open. The vision of this universal Hermetic philosophy that could end the fighting amongst so many great world religions was fated to fade. But its influence remained strong amongst visionaries and scientists, as it always had, ladies and gentlemen, because the smartest and the most successful among those of us know that this knowledge is important for not only the flourishing of ourselves, but the flourishing of society. And remember, I said it earlier, great change begins with the individual and within the individual. And so this influence of this great Hermetic philosophy and religion remains strong amongst visionaries and scientists, such as Sir Isaac Newton, for example. Like many men of his time, was passionately interested in alchemy, the patron god of which was thrice great Hermes, Hermes Trismegistus. Indeed, the word alchemy means from Egypt. Fascinating. I never knew that. That's that's an interesting fact. You learn something every day, ladies and gentlemen. Alchemy means from Egypt. The astronomer Kepler published quotes from the Hermetica in his greatest work on the harmony of the world. In 1640, the poet John Milton, who we read one of his poems in the Wisdom of the Ages series, which is what we used to do on Wednesday on this channel about a month or two ago. We finished that up. So be sure to check my playlists if you love what I'm doing here and if you enjoy and get value from these videos. Be sure to check the playlists because the Wisdom of the Ages might be the best one on this channel. Now, so on the harmony of the world, and then in 1640, the poet John Milton celebrated the wisdom of Hermes, writing these words, quote, "Or let my lamp at midnight hour be seen in some high lonely tower, where I may oft outwatch the bear, with thrice great Hermes, or uns fair, the spirit of Plato, to unfold what worlds or what vast regions hold the immortal mind that hath forsook her mansion in this fleshy nook." Wow, ladies and gentlemen. Il Penseroso is what that was titled. That's a deep one. I so much love that because that talks about having a spiritual body and living in what he describes here, that the immortal mind that hath forsook her mansion, so our spiritual body being stuck in this fleshy nook. Mightily fascinating. And that's where today's lesson, ladies and gentlemen, will come to an end, because next week on Wednesday Wisdom and the introduction to the history of the Hermetica and the lost wisdom of the Pharaohs and how it changed the world, we come to the section titled The Demise of Thrice Great Hermes. Unfortunately, that is the case, but as we will see, nonetheless, some of the claims regarding the Hermetica are true. So it comes into dispute, apparently. And then we get to the wisdom of the Pharaohs and the Hermetica going forward, the mind of God, the new version of the Hermetica, so things always change. Here's a bit I'll give this before we go. Approaching a text which is also of extreme antiquity and has already been through the hands of a number of translators is no doubt very difficult. And that's what we're dealing with here in the Hermetica. In book XVI of the Corpus Hermeticum, which is the Corpus Hermeticum is another book. Here, let me pause. I'll show you that real quick, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, I grabbed it. And so I was just referencing there in a book of the Corpus Hermeticum, Hermes writes this, and we'll get to that to finish today. But this, just for reference, ladies and gentlemen, is the Corpus Hermeticum. Now, if you were a very Christian person, you would say that looks evil, that looks dark. Can't mess with that. This is the Corpus Hermeticum, the Divine Pymander. Original manuscript, Hermes Trismegistus, 3rd century AD. This is a new edition, 2015. So this, oh, dang it, I messed up the blurriness of the camera, but that's fine, ladies and gentlemen. All I'm doing is talking anyway. So, but this entire book is about Hermetics, and of course is the original manuscript, as close as we can get through translations from Hermes Trismegistus in the 3rd century AD. But so there's a Corpus Hermeticum, there's the Kybalion, which is another whole book of Hermetic philosophy, which is really deep. Most popular occult work on the with a new introduction, scholar of mysticism. It says on the back, for generations, readers have debated the origin and studied the knowledge of this mysterious exploration of the Hermetic wisdom. And then, of course, there's the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, or the Emerald Tablet of Hermes. And then this is far deeper. I would not recommend getting to this unless you just want philosophical points of view, but that is where the painting I did earlier comes from. This is Franz Barton, an initiation into Hermetics. But that's, I would save that for later, ladies and gentlemen. Don't need to go there yet. So, just so you know, there's more. This the Hermetica here is just it's not all there is on this wisdom. And I have yet to even look into any books on Platonic philosophy or Pythagorean philosophy. So that's all, connected. This is what was being studied in these places that we're talking about in this history of the Hermetica, ladies and gentlemen. So to finish up for today is a little bit from a book of the Corpus Hermeticum. Hermes writes, "My teachings will seem more obscure in times to come. When they are translated from our Egyptian mother tongue into that of the Greeks, translation will distort much of their meaning. Expressed in our native language, the teachings are clear and simple, for the very sound of an Egyptian word resonates with the thing signified by it." This is powerful. "All possible measures should be taken to prevent these holy secrets being corrupted by translation into Greek, which is an arrogant, feeble, showy language, unable to contain the cogent force of my words." So there's a knowledge of resonance and sound frequencies and how sounds have meanings that go along. What he said there, for the very sound of an Egyptian word resonates with the things signified by it. Now, he's talking about the Greek language, very feeble, showy language, which is unable to contain the cogent force of my words. The Greek language lacks the power to convince, and Greek philosophy is nothing but noisy chatter. Our Egyptian speech is more than talk. Its utterances are replete with power. Boom, ladies and gentlemen. That's a deep one. That's a deep one. And so this is an attempt to distill the essence of his teachings for a new generation of spiritual seekers. And that, my friends, is a boom to wisdom, a boom to the wisdom of the Pharaohs and the history of the Hermetica, and a boom to knowledge. We'll leave it there, ladies and gentlemen. That was fantastic. I really have no clue how long this video was, but it felt like a good one. And remember, ladies and gentlemen, to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through greater awareness and a greater understanding of the reality we find ourselves in. And remember to seek to discover the hidden wisdom of the ages, like we do here on Wednesday Wisdom. And also remember, ladies and gentlemen, that happiness is the way. It's the action that we bring to life. And if we can create that ability through practice, that we can bring happiness to life, then the goals and the things that we've been telling ourselves, oh, I'll be happy when I finally get there, that will be irrelevant because we'll already be there. And then the entire journey is wonderful. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. I love and appreciate all of you for spending time here with me and Timothy Freke and Peter Gandy and Hermes Trismegistus and all the wonderful people mentioned in this history of the Hermetica, as well as Lao Tzu and Wayne Dyer on Tuesdays, or yesterday, Tuesday Tao and Wednesday Wisdom, ladies and gentlemen. And be sure to expand the description below the video. There's like a little description that says more. You can hit that, it makes it bigger, and there will be links to the book itself so you can get it for yourself to put it on your shelf for reference, as well as a link to my landscape paintings, which it looks like I need to do a new one now because that one's blank, ladies and gentlemen. And also a link to C60 Purple Power, the most powerful antioxidant known to man. Give yourself or a family member the gift of health, ladies and gentlemen. Nothing better than that. Healing, health, comfort, peace, and revitalization. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I'll catch you next week on Tuesday Tao and maybe some short videos in between now and then, and next week on Wednesday Wisdom with some more esoteric knowledge and wisdom of the Pharaohs to bring your way.